Colorado Territory, 1875. The dust-laden wind swept across the barren streets of Silver Creek, a mining town that had seen better days. The setting sun cast long shadows between the weathered buildings, painting the world in hues of amber and gold, as Lily Kensington stood alone at the entrance of the Frontier Saloon. At 22 years old, she was a striking figure in her emerald green dress, her honey-blonde hair pinned up carefully beneath a modest hat, though a few rebellious strands had escaped to frame her delicate features. She drew a deep breath, steadying herself against the rough wooden post. For 3 years she had lived by a singular truth: the frontier was no place for love, only survival. The harshness of the West had taught her that much after she'd buried both parents in the unforgiving soil of this territory. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, straightening her spine. All she needed was a job, something to keep her fed and housed until she could save enough to return east. That was what she wanted, escape, what she told herself she needed. The saloon doors swung open, bringing with them the sounds of raucous laughter and piano music. Lily squared her shoulders and stepped inside, immediately assaulted by the pungent blend of whiskey, tobacco, and unwashed bodies. The room fell into a curious silence as she made her way toward the bar, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon her. The barkeeper, a portly man with a handlebar mustache, raised an eyebrow. "Can I help you, miss?" "I heard you might need help serving drinks," Lily said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am looking for employment." Across the room, seated at a corner table with a glass of whiskey and a dog-eared book, sat Kieran Young. At 25, he had already seen enough of the frontier's brutality to last several lifetimes. His lean frame was clothed in a simple button-up shirt and denim pants, with worn but well-maintained boots. His chestnut hair was neatly trimmed, and a light stubble shadowed his jawline, highlighting the deep green of his eyes that now fixed on the newcomer. Unlike most of the men who gawked openly at Lily, Kieran's gaze held something else, concern, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. He knew all too well the look of someone facing the abyss of frontier loneliness. He had lived with that same haunted expression since losing his family to a raid 3 years prior. Kieran believed he was meant to ride alone. Every person he had ever loved had been taken from him, first his mother to fever, then his father and sister to violence. His life as a ranch hand and occasional deputy was solitary by design. Attachment on the frontier was a luxury he couldn't afford, not when death lurked behind every ridge and ravine. The barkeeper's booming laughter drew Kieran from his thoughts. A serving girl. "Well now, aren't you just what this establishment needs to class itself up? But this ain't no place for a lady, especially one looking like you." Lily's chin lifted defiantly. "I can work harder than any man here, sir. And I need the position." "I reckon that might be true, but—" "She can have my job, Chester," called a tired voice from behind the bar. A woman in her 40s stepped forward, wiping her hands on a stained apron. "I'm heading to Denver to live with my sister. Been meaning to tell you." The barkeeper Chester sighed heavily. "Suppose I don't have much choice then, do I? Fine, miss." "Kensington, Lily Kensington." "Miss Kensington." "You start tomorrow, sundown. Don't be late and don't expect special treatment." As Lily turned to leave, relief evident in the softening of her shoulders, 3 miners blocked her path. The tallest one, a man with a jagged scar running down his cheek, leered at her. Now, what's the hurry, pretty lady? Stay and have a drink with us." "No, thank you," Lily replied firmly, trying to step around them. The miner grabbed her wrist. That wasn't really a request. Kieran was on his feet before he realized what he was doing, his book abandoned on the table. Something about the woman's quiet dignity had stirred something inside him, something he thought had died with his family. "The lady declined," Kieran said, his voice low but carrying across the suddenly quiet saloon. He stepped between Lily and her harassers, his hand resting casually near the revolver at his hip. "I believe that settles the matter." The miner sized up Kieran, noting the way he carried himself, the steady confidence of a man who knew how to handle himself in a fight. With a grunt of disgust, he released Lily's wrist. "Always some hero," the miner spat. Fine, have it your way, she don't look worth the trouble anyhow. As the miners retreated to their table, Kieran turned to Lily. Are you all right, Miss Kensington? Her blue eyes studied him with cautious gratitude. Yes, thank you, Mr. Young, Kieran Young. He tipped his hat slightly. May I escort you to wherever you're staying? Silver Creek can be unwelcoming to newcomers after dark. Lily hesitated, the warning bells of self-preservation ringing loudly. But something in his eyes, a solemnness that mirrored her own, made her nod. That would be appreciated, Mr. Young. I'm staying at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house. Outside, the evening air had cooled, and stars were beginning to pierce the darkening sky. They walked in silence for a moment before Lily spoke. I don't usually require rescuing, Mr. Young. A small smile touched his lips. I don't usually play the rescuer, Miss Kensington. Then I suppose we've both had an unusual evening. As they approached the boarding house, Kieran found himself reluctant for their brief encounter to end. Miss Kensington, if you don't mind my asking, what brings a woman like you to a place like Silver Creek? Lily paused on the bottom step of the boarding house porch. Necessity, Mr. Young. The same thing that brings most people to places they'd rather not be. She studied him for a moment. And you don't strike me as a typical saloon patron. I work at the Rocking J Ranch outside town. I was only in Silver Creek to pick up supplies and mail. He hesitated, then added, and sometimes a quiet corner of the saloon is the only place to find a moment's peace with a book. This earned him a genuine smile, small but transformative to her face. A cowboy who reads, now that is unusual. Before Kieran could respond, the boarding house door opened, revealing a stern-faced older woman. Miss Kensington, I was growing concerned. It's not proper for a young lady to be out after dark. My apologies, Mrs. Peterson. Mr. Young was kind enough to escort me back. Mrs. Peterson's sharp eyes assessed Kieran before softening marginally. Well, that was gentlemanly of you, sir. Good evening to you. Good evening, ma'am. Kieran tipped his hat again, then turned to Lily. Miss Kensington, I wish you well in your new position. Thank you, Mr. Young. For everything. As Kieran walked back toward the livery where his horse was stabled, he found himself glancing back at the boarding house. He had spent 3 years avoiding connections, building walls against the possibility of loss. Yet in the span of a single evening, a pair of determined blue eyes had found a crack in those defenses. The following week brought Lily a harsh education in frontier saloon work. Her feet ached from hours of standing, her hands were raw from washing glasses, and her ears rang with crude remarks and bawdy songs. Yet she endured it all with the quiet determination that had carried her through the deaths of her parents and the loss of their homestead to unpaid debts. She had been surprised when Kieran Young returned to the saloon 3 nights after their first meeting. He took the same corner table, ordered a single whiskey that he nursed throughout the evening, and read his book. Occasionally their eyes would meet across the room, and he would offer a small nod of acknowledgement. On his 3rd visit, Lily approached his table during a lull in the evening. Either that's a very long book, Mr. Young, or you're a particularly slow reader, she said, wiping down his table. Kieran closed his copy of The Last of the Mohicans with a slight smile. Neither, Miss Kensington. I just find that rereading old friends is preferable to making new acquaintances in this town. Old friends, she repeated, glancing at the book. I suppose stories are more reliable companions than people, especially out here. They certainly leave when you ask them to, he agreed. Then, after a moment's hesitation, how are you finding your new position? It pays for my room and board with a little left over for savings. That's all I require. She straightened, balancing her tray. Why do you really come here, Mr. Young? You don't drink much, you barely talk to anyone, and something tells me you have plenty of books at home. The directness of her question caught him off guard. He considered deflecting, but found himself answering honestly instead. I suppose I come to remind myself that I'm not entirely alone in the world, even if I prefer to keep it that way. The vulnerability in his admission stirred something in Lily. Before she could respond, a crash from across the room signaled a fight breaking out between two card players. Chester's bellowing voice called for her assistance, and the moment passed. But something had shifted between them, a recognition of similar wounds carried beneath careful veneers of self-sufficiency. The following Saturday afternoon, Lily was at the general store purchasing necessities when Kieran entered. He tipped his hat in greeting, "Miss Kensington." "Mr. Young," she replied with a small smile, "no book today." "I came to pick up supplies for the ranch." He gestured to his list. "Though I admit, finding decent reading material in Silver Creek is becoming a challenge." Lily hesitated, then said, "I have a few books in my trunk, novels mostly brought from back east. You'd be welcome to borrow one if you'd like." Kieran looked genuinely surprised by the offer. "That's very kind of you." "It's purely selfish, I assure you," she said with a hint of teasing. "If you find something new to read, perhaps you'll stop taking up my most profitable table every evening." This drew a laugh from him, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. Several customers turned to look, clearly unaccustomed to such a sound from the typically reserved Cowboy. "Well, I wouldn't want to impact your earnings," he replied. "Perhaps I could call at the boarding house tomorrow." "If that's appropriate, of course." "Mrs. Peterson allows callers on Sunday afternoons in the parlor," Lily confirmed. "I finish at the church charity kitchen at 3. The next day found Kieran unusually nervous as he approached the boarding house, his hat in hand and his boots freshly polished. He had even trimmed his stubble and worn his good shirt, efforts that made the ranch foreman raise knowing eyebrows when Kieran left the bunkhouse. Mrs. Peterson showed him to the parlor, where he waited under the watchful eye of her elderly husband, who sat whittling in the corner. When Lily entered, Kieran stood immediately, struck by how different she looked in her Sunday dress of pale blue cotton, her honey-blonde hair falling in soft waves to her shoulders. "Mr. Young," she greeted him with a small smile, "I'm pleased you came." She presented him with 2 books, a collection of Shakespeare's works and a novel by Charles Dickens. As they discussed literature, Kieran found himself sharing how his mother had taught him to read by lamplight in their small Kansas farmhouse, and Lily revealed that books had been her escape during the long journey west with her parents. "They died of fever," she said quietly, her fingers tracing the embossed cover of the Shakespeare volume. "Within weeks of each other 2 years ago, the doctor bills took what little we had left." "I'm sorry," Kieran said, understanding the weight of such loss. "My family," he stopped, the words catching in his throat. He hadn't spoken of them to anyone in years. Lily met his eyes. "You don't have to tell me." But something made him continue. "Raid on our homestead. Apache warriors who'd broken from the reservation. I was away delivering horses to the army. When I returned," he shook his head. "My father and sister were gone. That was 3 years ago." Lily's hand moved as if to touch his, then stopped, resting on the table between them. "So we're both alone." "It's safer that way," he said, voicing the belief that had guided him since that terrible day. "Out here, attachment just gives fate another way to wound you." "Is that why you work as a ranch hand, instead of building your own place?" "Partly," he admitted. "No roots, no real connections, just passing through until." "Until what?" she asked softly. Kieran realized he had no answer. Until what indeed? Until he stopped hurting, until he found some purpose beyond mere survival. He had been existing, not living, for so long that he'd forgotten there might be an alternative. Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Peterson announcing that calling hours were over. As Kieran prepared to leave, Lily walked with him to the door. "Thank you for the books, Miss Kensington." "Lily," she said suddenly, "when we're not in public, perhaps you could call me Lily." He smiled, touched by the small gesture of friendship. "Then I'm Kieran." As spring warmed into summer, a tentative friendship bloomed between them. Every Sunday, Kieran would call at the boarding house, returning one book and borrowing another. Sometimes they would walk through town, maintaining a proper distance but finding their conversations drawing them closer in ways that had nothing to do with physical proximity. Lily learned that Kieran had a dry wit beneath his serious demeanor, and he discovered that behind her practical exterior lay a mind full of dreams and observations about the world. Neither of them spoke of the growing attachment between them, each still clinging to the belief that emotional distance was the only safe harbor in the unpredictable territory. But Silver Creek had noticed. Whispers followed Lily at the saloon, some merely curious, others malicious. One evening in late June, as she cleared glasses from a table of miners, she overheard a conversation that froze her in place. "That's the girl who's sweet on Young," one man said, his voice slurred with drink. "The quiet cowboy from Rocking J." "Young," another replied, "the one they call the Ghost." "That's him. Got that name 'cause they say he tracked down every last Apache from the band that killed his family. Hunted them like a ghost for months after the raid. Folks say he killed 6 men with that Colt he carries. A bounty hunter. Worse. A man with nothing left to lose, the kind who don't care if he lives or dies." Lily nearly dropped her tray, her mind reeling. Kieran had never mentioned this part of his past. The man she had come to know seemed incapable of such cold-blooded vengeance, no matter how great his loss. Yet something in the story rang true with the shadows she sometimes glimpsed behind his eyes. That Sunday when Kieran came to call, Lily found herself watching him more carefully, searching for signs of the man described in the saloon. His hands, which handled books with such care, had they really taken lives in retribution? "You're quiet today," he observed as they sat in the parlor. "Is something troubling you?" Lily hesitated, then decided directness was the only path forward. "I heard something in the saloon about you, about what you did after your family was killed." Kieran's expression shifted, a shudder falling over his features. "I see. Is it true?" she pressed gently. "Did you hunt down the men responsible?" For a long moment he was silent, his eyes fixed on some middle distance. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled. "Yes, I tracked them, I found them. And I killed 4 of them." His green eyes met hers, challenging her to judge him. "Does that change how you see me?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Should it? I was someone else then, hollow, driven only by rage and grief." His hands tightened around the book in his lap. "I'm not proud of it, but I won't lie to you and say I regret it either." Lily considered his words. The frontier had its own justice, harsh and immediate. How many men in Silver Creek had similar stories they never spoke of? The West was built on blood and vengeance as much as on courage and determination. "Thank you for your honesty," she finally said. "I would rather know the truth, however difficult, than be protected from it." Something shifted between them that day, a deeper understanding, perhaps. Or the recognition that they had each been shaped by loss and survival in ways that defied simple judgment. As July brought sweltering heat to Silver Creek, Kieran found himself riding into town more frequently, no longer waiting for Sundays to see Lily. He would stop by the saloon in the afternoons before it grew busy, ostensibly to return books or bring her small gifts: wildflowers from the prairie, a ribbon from the general store, once even a small silver hair comb he'd purchased from a traveling peddler. Chester, the barkeeper, had taken to watching these interactions with amusement. "Never thought I'd see the day when Kieran Young came courting," he remarked to Lily one afternoon after Kieran had left. "That man's been a ghost in these parts for years." "He's not courting me," Lily protested, though her cheeks flushed. "We're friends, that's all." Chester merely laughed. "Sure, and I'm the Queen of England, just be careful, girl. Men with pasts like his don't easily make peace with themselves." Lily knew there was truth in Chester's warning. Despite their growing closeness, Kieran maintained a certain distance, emotional if not physical. Whenever their conversations veered toward the future, he would gently steer them back to safer ground. And though she sometimes caught him looking at her with an expression that made her heart race, he never acted on whatever feelings might be developing between them. For her part, Lily was fighting her own battle against attachment. Her plan had always been to save enough money to return east, to find a teaching position in some civilized town where the memories of her parents didn't haunt every horizon. Allowing herself to care for Kieran complicated that plan in ways she wasn't ready to acknowledge. The delicate balance of their relationship shifted dramatically one hot August night. The saloon was crowded with cowboys from a cattle drive passing through, the air thick with smoke and tension. Lily moved efficiently between tables, dodging wandering hands and ignoring crude remarks with practiced dignity. Kieran wasn't there that night. He'd mentioned needing to help with preparations for a cattle shipment at the ranch. His absence left Lily feeling strangely vulnerable, though she chided herself for such foolishness. She had managed perfectly well before he came into her life. As the evening wore on, a newcomer entered the saloon, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a weather-beaten face and cold eyes. The room quieted slightly as he made his way to the bar, men shifting subtly away from him. Something about his presence set Lily's nerves on edge. "Whiskey," he told Chester, his voice a gravel rasp. As Chester poured, the man's eyes scanned the room, eventually settling on Lily. His gaze followed her as she moved between tables, a predatory assessment that made her skin crawl. "Who's the new girl?" she heard him ask Chester. "Miss Kensington, and she's not interested in whatever you're thinking, Maddox." The man Maddox chuckled. "They're all interested eventually." When Lily approached the bar for her next order, Maddox blocked her path. "Evening, darling. Harlan Maddox at your service." He tipped his hat, revealing a receding hairline and a long scar that disappeared beneath his collar. "Excuse me, sir," Lily said firmly, attempting to step around him. Maddox moved with her. "No need to be in such a hurry. Why don't you sit with me a while? I pay well for pleasant company." "I'm not that kind of working girl, Mr. Maddox. Now please let me pass." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "I didn't say you could leave." Chester reached beneath the bar, likely for the shotgun he kept there. "Let her go, Maddox, we don't want trouble." "No trouble at all," Maddox replied, his grip tightening painfully on Lily's wrist. "Just getting acquainted with the local hospitality." Lily's free hand found a half-full beer mug on the bar. Without hesitation, she flung its contents into Maddox's face. He released her with a roar of anger, wiping beer from his eyes. "You little," he lunged for her, but Chester had the shotgun up now. "That's enough. Get out of my establishment, Maddox." The big man glared at Lily, beer dripping from his beard. "No one humiliates Harlan Maddox." "No one." His hand moved toward his holster. The saloon doors swung open and Kieran walked in, taking in the scene with a single glance. His expression hardened as he saw Lily backed against the bar, Maddox looming over her despite Chester's shotgun. "Is there a problem here?" Kieran asked, his voice deceptively calm. Maddox turned, sizing up the newcomer. Recognition dawned in his eyes. "Well, if it isn't the ghost himself, still playing hero, Young." Kieran went very still. "Maddox, I heard you were in prison." "Got out 3 months ago. Thought I'd come see how the West is faring without me." Maddox's lips curved in an ugly smile. "Seems you've found yourself a pretty distraction." "Miss Kensington isn't any concern of yours," Kieran said, moving closer, "and I suggest you leave her be." The tension in the room was palpable, customers edging away from the brewing confrontation. Lily watched Kieran's face, seeing the careful control that masked what she now recognized as banked rage. Maddox seemed to reconsider his options, looking from Chester's shotgun to Kieran's steady gaze. With a harsh laugh, he stepped back. "Another time, then. Evening, Miss Kensington. I'll be seeing you again." The threat in his words was unmistakable. He shouldered past Kieran and left the saloon, leaving a silence in his wake that broke into murmurs as the door swung shut. Chester lowered the shotgun with a relieved sigh. "Damn fool nearly got himself killed. You all right, Lily?" She nodded, though her wrist throbbed where Maddox had gripped it. "I'm fine, thank you, Chester." She turned to Kieran. "And thank you." Kieran's eyes were still on the door, his expression troubled. "You shouldn't be alone tonight. Maddox isn't known for letting go of grudges." "My shift ends in an hour," Lily said. "Mrs. Peterson's is just down the street." "I'll wait and walk you," Kieran insisted. The intensity in his voice surprised her. "Lily, Harlan Maddox is dangerous. He was a hired gun for the cattle barons during the range wars. If he's taken an interest in you. The implications hung in the air between them. For the first time since coming to Silver Creek, Lily felt truly afraid. The remainder of her shift passed in tense anticipation. Kieran sat at his usual table, but instead of reading, he kept his attention on the doors and windows, his hand never far from his revolver. When closing time came, he insisted on checking the street before allowing Lily to step outside. The night was unusually dark, clouds obscuring the stars and moon. As they walked toward the boarding house, Kieran kept Lily close to his side, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. The town seemed deserted, most respectable citizens long since retired to their beds, the less respectable ones still engaged in drinking and gambling. "You know him, don't you?" Lily asked quietly. "Maddox." "It's not just by reputation." Kieran's jaw tightened. "Yes, he was hired by the same rancher whose land was raided by the Apache band that killed my family. I crossed paths with him during. After. He seems to hold a grudge against you. I prevented him from killing an innocent man, a shopkeeper he claimed had cheated him." Kieran's hand unconsciously moved to a small scar on his temple. "We had a disagreement about it." They had reached the boarding house, its windows dark except for the lamp Mrs. Peterson always left burning in the entryway. As Lily turned to thank Kieran and bid him good night, a movement in the shadows across the street caught her attention. Before she could react, Kieran was pushing her behind him, his revolver appearing in his hand as if by magic. "Show yourself," he called. Harlan Maddox stepped into the dim pool of light cast by the boarding house lamp. "Predictable as always, young, I knew you'd play the gallant protector." He held a pistol casually at his side. "The lady and I have unfinished business." "Go inside, Lily," Kieran said, his voice low and urgent. "Lock the door and wake Mr. Peterson." "I'm not leaving you out here," she whispered back. Maddox laughed. "Touching, she's got spirit, I'll give her that, but this isn't about her, not really." His eyes narrowed. "This is about you and me, Ghost. Unfinished business. Whatever quarrel you have with me, let's settle it away from town," Kieran said evenly. "No need to involve innocent people." "Oh, she's involved now," Maddox replied. "I've been watching you, seeing how you look at her. The great Kieran Young, who swore never to care for anyone again after what happened to his family, found your weakness, didn't I?" Lily felt Kieran tense beside her. In that moment she realized two things. Maddox was right about Kieran's feelings for her, and he was prepared to use those feelings to destroy him. "What do you want, Maddox?" Kieran demanded. "Justice," Maddox spat. "You cost me everything when you interfered with my business, my reputation, my livelihood. 3 years in territorial prison while you played hero and rode away clean." He raised his pistol. "An eye for an eye, Young. I'm going to take something precious from you, just like you did to me." Everything happened at once. Maddox's gun swung toward Lily. Kieran fired, the sound deafening in the quiet street. Maddox staggered but managed to get off a shot before falling. Lily felt Kieran jerk beside her, heard his sharp intake of breath. Then silence, broken only by approaching footsteps and shouts as the gunfire roused the town. "Kieran," Lily turned to find him leaning heavily against the porch railing, his free hand pressed to his side. In the dim light, she could see blood seeping between his fingers. "Oh God, you're hurt." "Not bad," he managed, though his face was pale. "Maddox." Across the street, the fallen man lay motionless. The boarding house door flew open, Mr. Peterson appearing with a lantern and his old army revolver. "What in tarnation?" he began, then saw Kieran's condition. "Mary, get the doctor, the young boy's been shot." What followed was a blur of activity. Doc Wilson arrived, pronouncing Maddox dead with a bullet through his heart. Kieran was taken to the doctor's small infirmary, where the bullet was extracted from his side, a painful process during which he refused laudanum, insisting on staying conscious. "Damn lucky," Doc Wilson declared, bandaging the wound. "Bullet missed anything vital. You'll be sore as hell, but you'll live if infection doesn't set in." Lily had refused to leave Kieran's side throughout the ordeal. As dawn broke over Silver Creek, she sat beside his cot, her hand resting lightly on his. "You should get some rest," he told her, his voice rough with pain. "You've been up all night." "So have you," she countered. "Besides, I'm not the one who decided to step in front of a bullet." A faint smile touched his lips. "Wasn't exactly a decision, more of an instinct," his expression sobered. "What Maddox said about you being my weakness, he wasn't wrong." Lily's heart quickened. "What do you mean?" Kieran's hand turned beneath hers, their fingers intertwining. "I've spent 3 years convincing myself that caring for someone was a liability I couldn't afford. That attachment out here only leads to more pain." His green eyes held hers. "And then I met you." "Kieran, let me finish." "When I saw Maddox threatening you in the saloon, I realized something. The walls I built to protect myself from loss, they didn't make me stronger, they just made me half alive." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm tired of being a ghost, Lily." Tears welled in her eyes. "I've been fighting the same battle," she admitted, telling myself that my plan to leave to go back east was the only safe path. That becoming attached to anyone or anything here would only lead to more heartbreak. And now I'm sitting beside a man who took a bullet for me, and I'm terrified, not because of what happened, but because I care about you too much to imagine leaving. The next weeks were a time of healing and transformation for them both. Kieran recovered at the small room he kept at the ranch, with Lily visiting daily despite the gossip it generated in town. Mrs. Peterson had initially objected to such impropriety, but the older woman's romantic heart eventually softened, especially after the minister himself commented that near-death experiences sometimes justified bending social conventions. As summer gave way to autumn, Kieran and Lily's relationship deepened. Their conversations, once carefully circumscribed to avoid vulnerability, now flowed freely into territories they had previously avoided: hopes, dreams, fears, and futures. One crisp October afternoon, Kieran took Lily riding to a ridge overlooking Silver Creek and the surrounding valley. The aspen trees were ablaze with gold and amber, the air clean and sharp with the promise of approaching winter. "I've been thinking," he said as they sat on a fallen log, sharing coffee from a thermos, "about what happens next." Lily watched his profile against the vast blue sky. "And what have you decided?" "That I want a future, not just a continuation of the past." He turned to her. "The foreman at Rocking J is retiring come spring. He's offered me his position." "Kieran, that's wonderful." "It comes with the old homestead cabin on the north end of the property," he continued. "It needs work, but it's solid. Good land around it, enough for a garden, maybe some chickens. Room to build on if—" He hesitated, then reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small object that glinted in the sunlight. Lily's breath caught as he opened his palm to reveal a simple silver ring with a small pearl set in the center. "It was my mother's," Kieran said quietly, "the only thing I have left of her. I've carried it with me all these years, never imagining I'd have a reason to take it out again." His eyes met hers, vulnerable and hopeful. "Lily Kensington, I know we've both been running from attachment, convinced that the frontier is too harsh a place for love to survive. But these past months have shown me that perhaps it's only love that makes this harsh place bearable." He took her hand gently. "I'm not a wealthy man, and I can't promise you an easy life. But I can promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to build something good and true with you, if you'll have me." Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks as joy bloomed within her chest. "Are you asking me to marry you, Kieran Young?" "I am," he confirmed, a smile breaking across his face. "Rather clumsily, it seems." Lily laughed through her tears. "Then yes. Yes, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Kieran felt the last remnants of his old beliefs falling away. The frontier had taken much from him, but in this moment it was giving something back, a chance at happiness he had convinced himself he could never deserve. They were married in the small church in Silver Creek the first Sunday of November, with half the town in attendance. Chester closed the saloon for the occasion. "Never thought I'd see the day," he declared gruffly, pressing a fine porcelain tea set into Lily's hands as a wedding gift. The old homestead cabin on Rocking J land became their home, transformed over the winter months by their combined efforts into a place of warmth and promise. Kieran's position as foreman brought stability they had both lacked for years, while Lily found fulfillment teaching at the small school that had opened in town. As spring returned to the Colorado territory, bringing new growth to the land, Lily stood on the porch of their home, watching Kieran return from his day's work. The setting sun gilded his features as he dismounted, his smile warming as he caught sight of her. "You're a sight for sore eyes," he called, crossing the yard to her. Lily stepped into his embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and open air that clung to him. "I have news," she said, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. Kieran drew back to see her face. "What is it?" She took his hand and placed it gently over her still flat stomach. "Come spring, there will be 3 of us here." The wonder that spread across his features was everything she had hoped for. In his eyes she saw not fear of future loss, but joy in present love, a transformation as profound as the one in her own heart. That night, as they sat together on their porch watching stars appear in the deepening sky, Lily reflected on the journey that had brought them here. They had both stood alone, convinced that isolation was the only defense against the frontier's harshness. Yet in finding each other, in opening their hearts despite their fears, they had discovered a truth more powerful than their carefully constructed walls. "What are you thinking about?" Kieran asked, his arm around her shoulders. "About how sometimes what we think we want isn't what we need," she replied. "I wanted to escape the West to return to something safe and familiar. You wanted to remain unattached, invulnerable, and yet here we are." "Here we are," he agreed, his hand finding hers, "building something neither of us thought possible." The Colorado night enfolded them, vast and star-filled. But unlike before, its vastness no longer signified loneliness. For Kieran and Lily Young, the frontier had become not just a place of survival, but a place of possibility, a wild, beautiful landscape where love, once given the chance to take root, could flourish against all odds. In each other they had found not just companionship but completion, a way to honor their pasts while embracing their future. Together, they had learned that even in the harshest terrain, the human heart's capacity for love remained the most enduring strength